Hello everybody, and welcome to my 8th top 10 list. In celebration of hitting 10,000 subscribers, I asked my viewers to come up with 10 top 10 lists of any topic that they thought would be interesting or entertaining for me to compose. Today, we will be talking about my top 10 favorite Bioware moments. Special thanks to Hannah for requesting this list. As with most top 10 lists like this list will contain major spoilers for the games that these scenes are involved in. And just like before, in order to help you avoid said spoilers, please take a look at the timestamp links in the description below in order to jump around as needed. Otherwise, for those of you who are sensitive to spoilers, consider yourself fairly warned. Without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Bioware moments. Number 10. Controlling Joker in Mass Effect 2. Joker is easily one of my favorite characters in the Mass Effect series. I believe I've mentioned my love for this man in at least 2 of my top 10 lists. In a game where you predominantly only control the main protagonist, Shepard, imagine my very pleasant surprise when I was thrown into controlling Joker for the first and only time. By this point, the Normandy is under siege, and all of the party members, including Shepard, the people who are actually trained to fight, are away on a mission. The intensity of the scene was amazing, especially considering Joker's physical condition. Due to his Vralik syndrome, he can't just run around the ship, but hobble about to avoid getting caught by the invaders. This extremely vulnerable situation was a massive departure from what we're normally used to while controlling Shepard, and that sudden shift is what makes this scene all the more effective and frightening. Though the scene doesn't last particularly long, it is chock full with suspense, deep concern for Joker and the crew's well-being, and even well-timed moments of comedy between him and Edie. Bioware could have easily made this entire portion its own cutscene, but their decision to make you actually control Joker through this attack was pure genius. A+ on execution, Bioware. Well played indeed. Number 9. Choosing between Alistair and Hawke in Dragon Age Inquisition. This major decision is presented to everyone who plays through the game. However, depending on your decisions made all the way back to 2 games prior, the gravity of this choice could be completely different for each person. In this scene, the Inquisitor has to decide between sacrificing Hawke or a companion Grey Warden that we befriended up to this point. The identity of said Warden could be one of 3 people: Stroud, Loghain, or Alistair. Again, depending on your past decisions in Dragon Age Origins. Considering that Hawke is my own PC in Dragon Age 2, and Alistair is easily my favorite character in the franchise, and quite frankly one of my favorite video game characters of all time, and my viewers knew it. So this set up a virtually impossible choice for me in particular. I remember debating back and forth forever during my LP. It was interesting watching the comments on my videos leading up to this moment as my viewers realized that Alistair specifically was the Warden that inevitably ended up involved in this choice. To make things even more ironic, I kept saying during my LP on numerous occasions prior to this how excited and glad I was that I kept Alistair as a Grey Warden instead of the very popular decision of making him king. No regrets, I had said, and this definitely got my viewers fired up knowing what would happen later. But to be perfectly honest, even then and still to this day, I am glad and don't regret making Alistair a warden. Given what I know now, I would still do the exact same thing again, because the fact that Alistair had so much more screen time as a warden than he would have in any other role in Inquisition was more than worth it. And that big major decision in my Let's Play would not have been nearly as impactful or gripping for me had it been Loghain or Stroud instead. Number 8. Geth versus Quarians in Mass Effect 3. The war between the Geth and the Quarians is a theme that runs through all 3 games of the original Mass Effect trilogy, and it finally culminates in Mass Effect 3. There are many different ways that this conflict can play out depending on decisions not only on the 3rd game, but the ones prior to it as well. And there are major consequences depending on how it's resolved, including the possibility of having a major NPC character die. Shepard had to make an incredibly difficult choice that could possibly sacrifice Legion and all the Geth, or Tali and the vast majority of the Quarian race. Just like in the list item prior, I spent a long time debating back and forth with this choice during my Let's Play. I was so torn because I really loved both races and desperately wanted to try to save everyone. Fortunately, this was one of those rare occasions where you could essentially save everyone. Well, almost. I managed to unlock a way that I could come to a peaceful resolution, but this could have easily not been the case depending on my decisions throughout the entire trilogy. This peaceful resolution, as I said, still came with a fatal price nevertheless, but that just made it more powerful. The aftermath of this conflict was so full of feels, especially after seeing the Geth so willing to forgive their creators that had wronged them for so many years. And it really warmed my heart hearing Tali admit that she was wrong. The other thing that deeply warmed my heart was when EDI realizes that in Legion's last moment, it referred to itself as I, symbolizing the fact that it considered itself its own person for the very first time. All this made the latter portion of the Geth and Quarian conflict that much more memorable. Number 7. Wicked Grace with Cullen in Dragon Age Inquisition. Now, all of you who have watched my Dragon Age Let's Plays, I'm sure would have been shocked if this wasn't on this list. Next to Alistair, Cullen is a super close second biggest crush that I have in the Dragon Age franchise, and I was pleasantly surprised with how much fan service Bioware gave all the Cullen fans in Dragon Age Inquisition. The Wicked Grace scene in general was extremely entertaining, since I always love when the ensemble cast hangs out together casually, enjoying each other's company while taking a break from the usual stresses of saving the world. But the whole bit with Cullen at the end was just a ridiculously amazing icing on the cake for me. My reactions during this entire scene has been a favorite for a lot of viewers, and for very good reason. I'm sure there's a good number of people who didn't really appreciate it nearly as much as myself and others, but those of us who do were so grateful that Bioware kept it in. Number 6. Leliana sings in Dragon Age Origins. I know that different people have different opinions on this particular scene in the first Dragon Age game. Some people found it to be a little out of place, or cheesy, or just random, like a Disney princess suddenly breaking out into song in the middle of a movie. For me, however, I found it to be so epic. I had goosebumps listening to and getting lost in the lyrics of this song from beginning to end. I hung on each word, even though it was in a language that I didn't understand, because it's in Elven. I just loved how this scene was shot, focusing on each individual party member, reacting to Leliana's performance in very differing ways. Overall, it was just a solid emotional moment for me, one that was very well timed when I experienced it in the game for the very first time, just before we headed into the final act of the game. This is why I had hoped that we would get to hear Leliana sing again in a future Dragon Age game. Number 5. The Dawn Will Come in Dragon Age Inquisition. More specifically, this item is talking about basically the entire In Your Heart Shall Burn chapter in Dragon Age Inquisition. This moment was easily the most epic part of the game for me, way more so than the climax ending itself, to be perfectly honest. We had just finished closing the breach, which was a major task since the opening sequence of the game, and our celebration is cut abruptly by an impending attack. The final party member appears, which for me, I was absolutely ecstatic about. And then the big bad villain is revealed, which, for the record, I had totally called years before Dragon Age Inquisition was even announced. And the intensity just goes up through the roof from there as we try to save Haven and its citizens. We get our high knees handed to us, but just when we seem to be at our lowest, this happens.
Shadows fall and hope has fled. Still your heart, the dawn will come. The night is long and the path is dark. Look to the sky, for one day soon the dawn will come.
It was reminiscent of Leliana's singing scene in Origins, and it gave me more feels and goosebumps. Of course, I got super excited when Leliana joined in, but I went crazy when Cullen started to sing too. And even after The Dawn Will Come ended, the epicness continued, with Solus revealing our home base Skyhold for the very first time. It was breathtaking. But it still didn't end there, because next up was the Inquisition formally, quote-unquote, coronating you as the official leader, the Inquisitor, to the rest of the masses. And with a super dramatic entrance of the new Inquisitor and his advisors, and Varric dropping the hint that our own PC character from Dragon Age 2, Hawk, was in Skyhold, ready to meet us face to face. The sheer amount of awesomely cool things were packed one right after the other, and it was amazing. This entire sequence was one of the most epic video game moments of all time for me. Number 4. The prison break in Dragon Age Origins. There's a part in the game where the warden is essentially thrown in prison, and it's up to our plucky companion party members to break them out. Normally, 2 hilarious results. First off, you get to pick which 2 party members will be in charge of rescuing you, and virtually every single permutation plays out a unique scene. You could tell the writers definitely had a field day creating these extremely entertaining dialogues. Every character provides their own personality and attitude towards the jailbreak. Some characters take the situation very seriously, others take it quite nonchalantly, and others can't help but put their own comical spin to the situation. Or a bit blasé, even. This scene gives the game a lot of replayability. And fortunately, we are in the age of YouTube, which means I always recommend my viewers to watch the full compilations of every rescue team permutation, because they are so worth seeing. I laugh out loud every single time. Thus makes this one of my absolute favorite moments in the Dragon Age Origins game. Number 3. The suicide mission in Mass Effect 2. There's a lot of epic moments in the Mass Effect series, but the entire suicide mission was the most epic of all for me. First of all, if you are in a romance with anyone on the ship, the major romance scene helps kick things off during the calm before the storm. Then we come to an extremely intense sequence trying to make it through the Reaper IFF as the Normandy is under attack. Your decisions throughout the game determine who dies on the ship, if any. By this point, your blood and adrenaline are pumping as the crew holds a meeting to strategize who will end up in separate squads. These tactical decisions will determine who survives and who doesn't. After Shepard gives his rousing speech, we head out to execute our plan. Again, decisions you make throughout can be the difference between life and death, and individual crew members are given great moments to shine. It all culminates to the final boss, one more major decision that will affect the following game, and a race to make it back safely to the Normandy as we make our escape from a ticking time bomb. All of this is happening with a breathtaking soundtrack that features my favorite song in the whole franchise. Just like in Inquisition's In Your Heart Shall Burn, this entire sequence was Bioware at its best. Number 2. The major twist in Knights of the Old Republic. Long before Star Wars The Old Republic MMORPG game, its origin game, Knights of the Old Republic, was the very first Bioware game I had ever played. And before I played this game, I never fathomed video games to have anything but a shallow or simple story. But as soon as I was exposed to this one, my eyes opened to all the possibilities that video games could have when it came to a deep and engrossing story with amazing characters. The pinnacle of this epiphany occurs in what for me was the biggest twist of any video game to date. My mind was so blown. I was going crazy. Back then, YouTube wasn't even a thing yet, so I definitely wish I had recorded my original reaction to it. But it was literally a game changer for me, and it sparked my absolute love for Bioware as a company. And my number one favorite Bioware moment is the Citadel DLC in Mass Effect 3. I know I'm probably cheating by encompassing an entire 8+ hour DLC for this, but there's so many amazing things packed into this DLC that I couldn't just pick only one moment. This was the final piece of content that Bioware released for the original Mass Effect trilogy, and they definitely did it justice. It was a whole giant DLC of fan service, but that's why I loved it. A major reason why this DLC worked so well was because they took virtually every major aspect that people loved about the trilogy and packed it into the DLC. This included more time to hang out with your crew members, more romantic opportunities with our significant others, an awesomely fun storyline that included the return of a playable crew member from the original game, and it also included a new home base that we can invite our friends over with, mini-games, and an arena. And arguably, the best part of the DLC was the ability to throw a super entertaining party where you could watch characters across all 3 games interact with each other in a chill and social setting. This was a homage and love letter to all the fans of the game. It was a great example of developers actually listening to their fans and trying to give them exactly what they wanted. For me, no other DLC of any game has come close to the outstanding execution of this one. I got very emotional by the end of it because it was the perfect way to say farewell, not only to Shepard and the gang, but also to the very first Let's Play that I had ever done on my channel. Well, that's all, folks. Please post in the comments what your favorite Bioware moments are. As always, I would love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another Top 10 list. And as always, love yourselves and love each other.